I just had the very great pleasure of sitting through today's Nintendo Direct, and it was solid. It wasn't the best ever or anything. There were no like mind-blowing announcements, but for the next 4 months, we are loaded with new Nintendo Switch games, and there are like things to point out about this. Like, I'm not really interested so much in the Nintendo Direct itself, but in like the implications as to what this means for the long-term viability of Nintendo Switch. And in spite of like the game journalist narrative, in spite of the Pretendos, in spite of like Player Essence, Arlo, RGT85, Kit and Krista, in spite of like what all of these people have been trying to tell you for the past like 6 months, Nintendo Switch is not on its way out. It's highly successful, bigger than Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, and not only is it still outselling them, it's well on its way to like being more relevant than they are throughout their entire life cycles. And people aren't really considering what that means for those brands. Like, we are at the point now where there is nothing that PlayStation or Xbox can do to compete can viably compete with Nintendo long term. Like, they 100% cannot compete with Nintendo, like, going forward. Like, it's just not going to happen. The only reason PlayStation 5s and Xbox Series X's are selling at all are because of brand recognition and, like, consumer loyalty, not because they're particularly good products. Like, more and more, it's becoming apparent that, like, Switch not only is more affordable, has better games, has more features, has more abilities, like, not only that, like, it just is overall like a superior product at a superior price point. I can attest to this myself. Going, I'm in the process of like, switching from Apple to like other brands. Like, of course, like Apple has like a consolidated, like, their platform. You have to like go from iOS, like Android or whatever. You have to like, buy other pieces of technology. You had to like kind of research it. You kind of had to like make the right choice. But like, I am in the process of like, getting a different phone. I am in the process of like looking at like alternatives. I just opted out of getting an iPad in favor of like an Amazon Fire like HD tablet, like because like, I just didn't like the price point. Like, I thought like the iPad was way too expensive for what it was, and so like I opted into something else. I opted into something else that like I personally would get more use out of. So yeah, I think like long term, like the era of like trying to convince people that like the PlayStation 5 is going to get good games that are bigger and more mature than anything Nintendo can put out, it's over, right? So not only is like PlayStation 5 like not getting Starfield, like Starfield in and of itself cannot compete with Tears of the Kingdom. So like whether or not like Starfield is a good game or like whether it's going to be Game of the Year, that's irrelevant, because like the fact is it's not available on PlayStation, and they're not going to be able to put out like a Starfield 2 before we get a new Zelda game. So like the issue is that like, Starfield, being an outlier thing, being a new IP from Bethesda, over a decade in development, like this big massive thing, it's like it's a one-off. Like it's not going to be able to get like a follow-up within a reasonable amount of time compared to like what Nintendo is doing with like these constant new spin-offs and like new entries from like several different teams. Like, people are not wanting to admit how efficient the Nintendo Direct, the Nintendo machine is at this day and age. Like, in this Direct alone, we got like, a new Mario game. We got a Princess Peach spin-off. We got like a remake of a classic game with Mario RPG. Like, what exactly can Xbox do to like compete with any of that? If kids go and play Super Mario RPG and like it, they're going to like, get into the other Mario RPG games. They're going to get into like, other RPG series. They're going to get into Star Ocean. They're going to get into Dragon Quest. They're going to get into like these other games on Switch. Like, more and more, I think people are going to start drifting away from brands like Final Fantasy and like these big heavy hitter like Sony brands and focusing more on these like Nintendo exclusive ones. Dragon Quest is, objectively speaking, much more popular on Nintendo than it is on PlayStation, in spite of Sony paying for exclusivity rights for Dragon Quest VII back in like the 90s, right? In spite of that deal, in spite of everything they've done to like secure Dragon Quest over the years, like, because Nintendo was committed to like, pushing Dragon Quest in the West, pushing the remakes, working with Square Enix to like handle this IP, like, we're at the point now where Dragon Quest is more well known on more well known on Nintendo consoles, in spite of Sony's attempts at like subverting like the audience and like trying to screw us over, right? And they focused more on Final Fantasy, right? They thought like Final Fantasy was the big heavy hitter that was always going to sell millions of copies, and now we're witnessing the failure of Final Fantasy 16 as real time. The Final Fantasy brand is dead because of what they chose to do with the brand. Meanwhile, like Dragon Quest is in a much better position. Much more cost effective to make, much more variety, and like the fans are a lot happier, right? Like we have seen the death of every major Sony PlayStation franchise in the past decade, while like Nintendo franchises continue to soar to new heights and popularity, right? Like I don't think that gaming journalists and YouTubers can really downplay Nintendo consoles anymore. Like I think at this stage, considering where we're at right now, like considering this direct, like Switch is guaranteed to last at the very least for the next 4 years, right? We have like plenty of titles on the horizon. There is no new hardware in sight. We're past like the point where like we can reasonably expect like PS5 to like outpace the Switch. It's just not going to happen. Switch is absolutely going to beat out the PS5 and Xbox Series X. It is going to win this console generation, just like it won the last console generation, right? Nintendo has won the console war. And like I've been saying for the past couple of years, nobody wants to admit it because so many people's entire careers revolve around like downplaying Nintendo and like trying to pretend as if they can't compete. Like Angry Joe to this day is like refusing to cover like Nintendo Directs. Like not only is he refusing to cover like any Nintendo content at all, like on his channel. Like not only is he not playing Tears of the Kingdom or like talking about like, the Switch in general, like he's gone like full tilt, like just not talking about Nintendo Direct showcases at all. Right, and it's such a weird contrast, like how he covers everything else, how he like covers every Marvel trailer under the sun, or how he covers like the Starfield Direct or like the PlayStation ones. Like it's so conspicuous at just how much contempt and hatred he has for Nintendo for like no reason whatsoever. But like because he's doing that, he's simply going to lose his audience. He's simply going to lose relevancy. He's going to lose everything he has because he's not talking about the console that everyone is playing. Like that's what we're dealing with here is that like the I hate calling them boomers because they're all millennials, but like, the people who spent like the last decade, pretending that Nintendo was irrelevant, pretending that they were going out of business, pretending that they were like, not interesting to them, pretending that like that Nintendo just couldn't compete. Like those people are absolutely going to be left out in the cold. Like these people absolutely are not going to be able to. These people are not influencing anyone. Essentially, like the Switch is absolutely 100% dominating right now, and it is winning the console war, and there's not a thing these people can do about it.